The Giants just, even if it's a struggling pitcher right now, it feels like the Giants' bats have been the slump buster for guys like Zach Gallen, who had his best start by far, it felt like, of the season. A guy in the past who's pitched well, but this season, God, he felt like it was like a 5.5 ERA. Just how massive is this stretch of baseball for this team? They needed that desperately. It looked like it was going to get away from them. So Camilo goes 2 innings, blown save, but gets the win. Wow, did they need that one?
They did, and I'm glad they got it. And it was, in the end, it was, maybe you could say like a character builder or whatever. I'm sure everybody felt really good about how hard they fought to get that win. They got to get some that are easier than that. Like it just right now, everything for this team is so difficult. And I think part of why they haven't played well is the cumulative effect of so many close games and, never having games in either direction where you can just breathe. The bullpens, just had to work so hard. There have been almost no games where they haven't come in where every pitch feels like the game's on the line. And I think after a half a season of that, that starts to take a toll. So anyway, it was a great win. They really, really need to find some way to have some games that don't come down to the last pitch and they'll, come down in the last 4 innings to where you feel like every single pitch the game's on the line. But nice win for sure.
Jung-Hoo Lee, his first 3-hit game in almost 2 months. And Dave, I think it's no coincidence the Giants got off to a great start in April, and Jung-Hoo Lee was hitting the ball to all sides of the field and was looking really good doing it. He hasn't been hitting well, and the Giants' record hasn't been that great either. From what you've seen from Jung-Hoo Lee, what do you think has been different about Jung-Hoo Lee now versus the Jung-Hoo Lee we were seeing back in April?
Yeah, I do agree with you that there's a direct correlation between how he's going and how this offense is going. And that's probably not totally fair to him. Once Devers settles in and you get Bryce Eldridge up here and, it shouldn't be that Jung-Hoo is the guy that is sort of dictating how this offense goes. But right now, you look up and down that lineup, they're thin and they do need him. And so it was huge last night that he had that game. What's the difference between then and now? I think a lot of it for him is just purely he is getting pitched differently. I do think it's been pretty obvious that the last a month he is seeing just a relentless array of pitches away. Like teams are just staying away. And he hasn't made that adjustment yet where he's beating them to left field or center field. And we saw a little bit of that in April, but I do think he's going to have to work on that, like whether he gets a little closer to the plate or, is a little less wide open with his stance. He changes his bat path just slightly, but because we've seen a lot of pop-ups and fly balls to left field, and that's not his game. So I think he has been pitched pretty one note over the last many weeks, and whether he can make that adjustment now or whether it's going to take a little more time, it would be understandable if it does, because he's still a very inexperienced big league player. I think a lot of it is just pure confidence. This is probably the first time he's struggled like this ever in his whole life at anything. And he puts a lot on himself. Jung-Hoo really, really cares about doing right for the team and being a good teammate. He probably puts too much on himself in that regard, and it's been wearing on him. It would help him a lot if he could just free up and be a little bit more confident.
What did you make of the timing and some of the comments from Buster saying, you know what, you can say all you want about Bob, the coaching staff, but it's on me at the end of the day when I construct this roster?
Yeah, he said it's on me, but he also really implied it's on the players. And I think that's part of why he did it. When you're not playing well and there starts to be some whispers, whether that was happening in the clubhouse, which I never detected, but, you start to hear callers into your show and, commenters on the stories or whatever saying, Bob's got to go and what's his coaching staff doing? And, those things start to happen when you're struggling as a team. And I think Buster wanted to make it clear that he wasn't placing the blame for the last couple weeks at the feet of the coaches or the manager. And Buster's been there as a player, and he knows, there's only so much. The manager's important. It's not to say that it's not important, but you never want a scenario where the players are thinking that, where they're thinking, well, it's not up to me. Something else is the reason this has gone wrong. And I don't know if that had really anything to do with the timing of it, or he just wanted to make sure that Bob and the coaches were a little more comfortable. It's easy to get uncomfortable, even if you put on a brave face and say nothing about it. When things start to go poorly, it's human nature to kind of worry about what the implications of that are going to be. But Bob's done a really good job this year. Overall, the coaches work hard every day. That's not the reason why the Giants have struggled, and I think Buster wanted to tell everybody that.
You saw more fiery Bob Melvin in the past than you've seen in the past. You're around him a lot more than I am this year. I've definitely noticed that Bob, there's more of an intensity around him. But I'm just curious, from what you're seeing from Bob Melvin, do you see that much of a fiery Bob Melvin this year as much as you maybe saw last year?
Yeah, I think in a slightly different way. I do think he's been more, and I don't want this to come across as a pejorative, I think he has been more comfortable this year, which is a good thing. Like, I think I do think Bob last year was getting to know everybody and maybe was a little bit more on edge just because of that. And I think now he's more comfortable with everybody around him, and that's natural. So I think that's a good thing. I don't want that to be interpreted as, oh gosh, now he's hit the comfort zone and that edge is gone. I think he's been pretty feisty, and I think you might see a little more of that here going forward, of him challenging some players. That's almost never going to be public because that's just not the way that he does it. But in the last couple of days, there have been a couple guys that he has privately challenged. And I think, maybe we're starting to see some of the response of that in some individual performances. You can't do that too much. You got to save those moments. But I think that I know that he's definitely willing to do that kind of stuff.
And Dave, obviously they're looking for the split against the Diamondbacks, which would be massive heading into a 3-game series in Sacramento, a AAA ballpark. We all very know A's struggling to pitch there, but the Giants even if it's a struggling pitcher right now, it feels like the Giants bats have been the slump buster for guys like Zach Gallen, who had his best start by far, it felt like, of the season. A guy in the past who's pitched well, but this season, God, he felt like a 5.5 ERA. He looked like a Cy Young at some points during that Giants game. He had quality start, but Robbie Ray going on the bump, Landry Roop struggled a little bit. Just how massive is this stretch of baseball for this team, starting with the A's, and then obviously this homestand coming up, Dave, get the Phillies and the Dodgers.
Yeah, you can't get buried here before the break. It's a very important stretch. And a lot of that is on the offense. Like, the pitching has started to wear down a little bit, and the pitching hasn't been as perfect. And the formula for this team is still win with pitching, and I think that is still how they need to, and they know that. Like, the path forward for this team is to dominate teams with their pitching. But while that's not happening, the dominance has not been there here. Even their best pitchers are going through a period now where the dominance hasn't quite been the same. You gotta have, and it's been every night for the Giants: 5 hits, 6 hits, 4 hits, 5 hits. Like, you gotta put more pressure on these opponents, and they just have done a really poor job of that lately. And sustaining rallies, giving themselves more opportunities. It's one thing to hone in and focus on, okay, they're not getting the hit with the runner in scoring position. There have been just long stretches here where they aren't getting any of those chances. And so they got to do better. And the Diamondbacks are relentless. They have a good offensive team, even though they're missing one of the best hitters in the game. Robbie Ray's really good. The Giants have a ton of faith in him, but you're facing a starter who's got a 5.5 ERA, and you got to be able to score some runs against him. So it's a really important stretch, and the Giants need more of what they got. They need a lot more consistently, and you're going to get Chapman back here real soon, like a matter of days, and Casey Schmidt is probably going to come back real soon, and that's going to help. So then, all right, let's go. Adames, Patrick Bailey, Jung Lee, Wilmer Flores, guys who have all been struggling. They need much more from those guys.
Dave, you mentioned the pitchers kind of losing their dominance there over the last bit of stretch. I think they got a 4.56 ERA over the last 17 games going into last night. But you also mentioned at the start here that the hitters are kind of stressed out by all the close games. I'm kind of curious. I assume, and I'm curious your thoughts on this. When you got like Logan Webb, Robbie Ray, Landon Roop going out there, and they're getting maybe 1 or 2 runs of support, in the same way that maybe the close games are wearing on the hitters, are we starting to see these close games and the lack of run support and the small margins for error? Is that kind of starting to have a negative impact on the pitchers and the bullpen as well?
Could be. I mean, part of it is just, it builds up over time where you just never have an outing that's not 100% full throttle, full, concentration. The starting pitchers are probably always going to be like that, but there's definitely something to that where if you're always pitching in a close game, that might have an effect over time. And then there's just no doubt that human nature creeps in where all of these guys start to feel like, and that they say that it's not happening, but I think it's almost impossible for it not to happen. Where it's just like you feel like if I make one mistake here, that's it. That's going to cost us our chance to win this game. And that's a really tough way to pitch at this level. So I think it'd be, even though I'm not hearing anybody say that to me, I think it would be almost impossible for that not to happen to some degree.
The Giants, statistically, they're up in amongst the league leaders in terms of teams taking fastballs right down the middle. I'm curious, are you noticing that trend too? And for me, it's kind of hard to kind of understand, like, why is that happening? And, when Devers takes a fastball right down the middle, I think that is a pitch that he should be planting in the seats. What do you make of this trend of the Giants taking these pitches right over the heart of the plate?
Yeah, I mean, look, all big league hitters, I say all, 98% of big league hitters are doing some version of guesswork. Big league hitters go up there with a game plan. They're looking for a pitch. They're looking for speed. They're looking location, some version of that. And the Giants definitely have more than their fair share of hitters who are doing that to a high degree. And it's not the way. I'll say this: that is not the way that Pat Burrell is saying, like, let's go. Here's our game plan. That is a personal preference, and the hitters who do it more than others, that's just the way they want to do it. Now, the guys that you named off are not the ones that would come top of mind to me to be the ones who, when I watch the games, really, really feel to me like that's the style of hitter that Devers and Ramos are. I think Devers and Ramos are, they have a game plan against a certain guy, looking certain pitch, but they're also a little bit more aggressive. And I do think that I believe that that's a hard way to be all the time. You got to have some version of that to succeed at this level. You just have to. Stuff's too good. You can't just go up there. I'm just going to see pitch, hit pitch. It really, really doesn't work that way. Like that's too hard at this level. You got to have more of a game plan and an attack. But big picture wise, this team is the worst fastball hitting team in the big leagues in terms of production and in terms of that passivity against fastballs. That must change. Like you cannot be a good offensive team and be the worst team against fastballs. And so however that gets accomplished, and I think for a bunch of the individual hitters, it's on them. Like that approach has to be tweaked a little bit. A little to my eyes, and this is really easy for me to say sitting 200 feet up above watching every game, but a little too much dedication to the idea of looking for a certain pitch over and over and over again, as opposed to maybe being a little more natural of a hitter and just, I think Christian Koss is kind of a good role model. Like, not everybody can be that style of hitter and not everybody should be, but, just kind of stick your face in there and compete and battle and fight off some pitches. And, to me, watch him hit and the way he was hitting before he got hurt felt more like that than what you see from a lot of Giants hitters.